This is the Amazing Teacher Podcast with Sam Rangel, episode number 13.
Welcome to the Amazing Teacher Podcast, where we sit down with amazing teachers and pick their brains for tips, strategies, and ideas that you can take into your classrooms and be amazing. Now, here's your host, Sam Rangel.
Welcome, amazing teachers, to the 13th episode of the Amazing Teacher Podcast. This is Sam from successintheclassroom.com, and I want to thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen to the podcast. It really means a lot to me when I see that so many of you are downloading the podcast. It shows me that there are a lot of new teachers and, probably some veteran teachers out there who are looking for new ways to have more success in their classroom. And what better way to learn than to listen to these amazing teachers on the podcast, sharing what has worked for them. Today, my guest on the podcast is Maureen Devlin, and she has a website called Teach Children Well. She's been a teacher for 28 years, and when I found her on Twitter, she was sharing her thoughts on one of my favorite topics, collaboration. So as I did a little bit more research, I read her blog, and I knew she would be the perfect guest for the show. We spoke about collaboration and classroom management, and she had some really great insights on these topics. But I was really inspired by what she shared concerning servant leadership. That was very good. So listen for that, servant leadership. Again, I want to thank you for spreading the word about the podcast on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. It really means a lot to me, and I thank you. All right, so let's get right into the podcast with amazing teacher Maureen Devlin. Ready? Here we go. Today, I am so happy to have Maureen Devlin from her blog, Teach Children Well, on the podcast. Welcome to the show, Maureen.
Thank you very much, Sam. I'm delighted that you invited me to speak today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for taking the time out. I like I said earlier in our introduction, I really enjoy speaking with teachers who have so much to offer with so many years of teaching.
Well, I appreciate that you value the experience.
Well, before we begin, Maureen, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your teaching career, how you got into teaching, and maybe a little bit on why you became a teacher?
Okay, well, I'm the oldest of 6 children, and I grew up in Worcester, Massachusetts, and I always enjoyed taking care of my younger brothers, sisters, and cousins. And I also really loved school as a child and was excited about the way school opened me up to new ideas and opportunities. And I experienced firsthand the way that education can transform lives throughout my wonderful education in Worcester Public and parochial schools, college, and graduate school. And after college, I started working at an architectural firm, and I was very inspired by the way the architects were invested in their work and design. And I wanted to invest myself in the same depth of design and creativity and service that I saw at Sasaki Associates, the multidisciplinary design firm I worked at. I worked in the marketing department. So that's how I was led to teaching.
Awesome. I was reading your blog, and I found the topic of collaboration very common in a lot of your posts. And many of my guests on the podcast have shared that connecting with other teachers and learning from each other is very valuable. But for those of us who have been in education for a long time, however, it would be easy to say that we know it all. And we don't really need to collaborate or professional development. How would you respond to teachers who may have that kind of attitude?
Well, I really love to learn, and I find that learning helps me to teach well. And there's no way that I can know it all or be it all. And that's why I look forward to dynamic collaboration. The ideas, insights, challenges, and experiences of others really help me to learn and teach well. So I truly enjoy collaboration, but I also find collaboration in schools challenging because the current model of schools is just beginning to open up to collaboration. We're just beginning to change the way school runs so that collaboration is fostered, celebrated, and utilized often. So I'm a real fan, but I also believe that school systems and structures need to change so that collaboration is accessible to all teachers.
What kind of changes would you recommend?
Well, we've instituted the professional learning communities
Hmm.
in our school. So our grade level team meets once a week during school time for an hour, and that's been very productive and very valuable. What I like is creating more time, like the PLCs, for teams of teachers who are responsible for groups of children to work together to design the best possible learning opportunities for those children and to share our strengths. And I just heard this term, the station rotation model, and we're using lots of innovative techniques plus tried and true to traditional teaching to serve children well, because I do think many minds are better than one, but you don't want to have too many minds. Last year I was at a conference at Google, and one of the presenters talked about having five, give or take one person, as a great collaborative group. And I think that is a good number to think about when you're thinking about collaborating teams that serve children.
Hmm. Um, the PLC model, that's the DeForest? Am I correct?
Yes,
The
yes.
DeForest. Yeah, I went to one of their conferences, and our school uh, started working on that model, and it's a great model. What I find is that it needs to be supported from administration to top down, because it's a great model if it's done right. Because otherwise it just becomes another program that teachers will say, oh, now what?
I agree. Our administration has been terrific about making that PLC time sacred.
Mm-hmm.
They are really working to grow the model, and they're listening to teachers. Also, I read a great book. The title of the book is Intentional Interruption. It's a terrific book to guide PLC work. I have found that book to be one of the best resources with regard to how to work in the PLC.
Tell me a little bit about what strategies are taught in that book, Intentional Interruption, because I really believe in the PLC model.
I guess the single most important nugget from intentional interruption is the fact that schools don't spend enough time on problem analysis, that schools systems are often ready for the quick fix. And the quick fix often doesn't even deal with the true problem. So I would say that at the PLCs, we need to really identify what are our key priorities and problems that we want to solve, and how do we want to serve children well. Which leads me to another great book that's sort of the cornerstone book of my practice, which is John Hattie's book about maximizing impact on learning, visible learning for teachers. And that book is fantastic. Hattie covers more than 1,000 research studies in that book. Every single word in the book counts. And he basically tells what really matters in schools. And it fits the PLC model because what Hattie recommends is that one, we identify the success criteria. Two, we strategize and figure out how we're going to get there. We assess often and revise and enrich as necessary. And then we look for next goals. So his process is dynamic, student centered, and truly about what learning is. And so the PLC needs to really prioritize what they're doing, set goals, work together, and always keep children as the centerpiece of the discussion and the work.
Great, great. I'll have both those books on the show notes so that listeners can find them and read them for themselves. Great,
Yeah, wonderful books.
great resources there. Well, Maureen, the purpose of the podcast is to sit down with amazing teachers like yourself and pick their brains for tips, strategies, and ideas that new teachers can take into the classroom and be amazing. I know that in your experience, you've run across many amazing teachers. Can you tell us what are some qualities that are common among the amazing teachers that you've come in contact with?
Well, I think, first of all, the amazing teachers I've worked with really took the time to build respectful, kind, and caring relationships with students and their families. Those educators were lifelong learners and contributors. They were always reading, attending cultural events, traveling, trying out new ideas, and sharing their knowledge and skill with generosity. They invigorated the environment with positivity and service to children. That's actually why I stayed in the school system I'm in so long, because when I started there, I worked with an absolutely dynamic group of teachers who dedicated their life to children.
Hmm. You mentioned families. Why is connecting with families so important?
Well, I think that young teachers often they haven't been parents yet, and they're much younger than the parents they serve, and it can be very daunting to serve families. And then once you become a mom and you realize how humbling it is to be a mother or a father or have your own family, you realize that parenting and teaching are quite similar. And really, teachers and families need to work together to serve the child. And so I've really tried to move from the idea of school to the idea of learning community. And in a learning community, the students, the parents, the teachers, the leaders, and the community members work together to best serve the children. So you see families as partners. And when you make families the partner with you, the children thrive.
I like what you mentioned about the learning community. I know when I first started years ago, it was just me and the kids. But now, like you say, we're getting more of the stakeholders, as they call them, involved in helping the kids do well in school. And I find that one of the greatest challenges or the greatest gaps is the parent involvement. Teachers just don't. They want the parents involved, but the parents don't know how to get involved. And that's where the teacher's communication with the parent is so crucial. You find that?
Yes, well, I have found that technology has really helped me to connect with parents in a much better way than in the past. I write a weekly newsletter. I have most of my homework can be done in school or at home. I offer coaching sessions for parents as well as conferences. I'm in constant communication with parents, and I don't look to fault parents in any way. I just look to understand families, and I try to serve them as best I can. I have adopted the servant leadership model of management, which I learned about through some of my chats online, actually, and I've read about it. And in the servant leadership model, as a teacher, you're the servant to the children and the families. And I have found that to be an extremely powerful model in terms of building community and serving children and families well. So that has revolutionized my teaching, adopting that model.
Wow, it's a whole attitude change. I'd like
It's
to.
amazing.
Yeah, I'd like to for you to talk more about that because that is something that I believe new teachers need to hear. That servant leadership model. How can new teachers adopt that, and what does it look like?
Well, it's amazing. For instance, I say to the students at the beginning of the year, I say, I get paid to serve you. And the best gift I can give you is the gift of a good education, because an education has the power to bring you choice. Choice brings you happiness and success. So I'm going to do everything I can this year to help you get a good education. But because I serve you, I need to hear from you. So I want to know what you need, what you want, and what you desire. And then I let the children tell me that. And then I do act on what they say. And we work together, and I have that conversation with them about once a month. We meet and talk about that. And they really feel that I'm there for them. And it has changed my teaching in such significant ways. I just love it. I enjoy the job so much more since I made that change.
Wow, it forces you, sounds like, to build relationship with your students, deep
Yes,
relationships.
yes, yes,
And
yes.
in many of the guests that I've had on the show, that seems to be one of the greatest pieces of advice that they give to the listeners. Build those relationships, and this sounds like that servant leadership model just fits right into that.
And it's a very professional relationship. I am still the teacher. I'm an older adult. I really am not their friend. I'm a mentor and a coach. That's more of my role. So I work in every way to help support their learning and help support their relationships with the other children and help make it a fun and exciting and profitable experience for them during the year.
And, I think there is another big aspect with new teaching, being the friends as opposed to being that mentor. There's a fine line. I think new teachers, they seem to have a hard time finding that line between being their friend and then being their teacher. Do you see that?
I actually think that can happen to any teacher at any stage. And I think that what makes the difference there is keeping your eye on the priorities of the job. What is it that you're there to do? You're there to give those children a good education. And how can you put all the pieces together so that you're providing the best possible education for each child? It's a huge challenge, and it's a very exciting challenge. Sometimes it's a very difficult challenge too.
Well, one more question on servant leadership. You say in the beginning of the year, "I'm here to serve you." Is there an issue with the kids losing respect for you?
No, I actually have not had that problem at all. I haven't had that problem at all. I'm very frank with the children. They know what I need to do and where I want to take them during the year. I'm very open about the standards. I'm very open about the system-wide requirements. I'm very open about what their families want. But I also listen to what they need and want. So no, I haven't had any issues with respect.
Good. Well, good. Well, many new teachers and even some veteran teachers struggle with classroom management. What would you offer as advice to a new teacher who maybe is struggling with classroom management?
Well, I think another strategy that I learned later in my teaching that I wish I had known earlier is that the children that are the most challenging require the most time up front in your teaching year. You want to really try to get to know those challenging children. You want to know what they need, what's going to make them happy, how they can succeed in your class, and you want to start working with them from their areas of strength. It may be that those children don't access the curriculum for the first month of school. You might be just relationship building with them through a few strengths. But as soon as that relationship starts to get strong, you'll see that those children start to buy into the program. And that is very important because our most challenging children are the ones that need us the most.
Mm-hmm.
And when those children start buying in and learning in your classroom, it's better for everybody else too. So that's one tip. And another tip I would say is focus on a few priorities to start. You can't be all things and you can't do it all. But if you take one or two priorities that your administrator is supporting and priorities the parents are behind and priorities that you are passionate about, that will really start to build your reputation and your capacity as a teacher. So that's advice I did get early on, and I think that's very important advice. And then the third advice would be to look into servant leadership. And when you ask that question about respect, you also always need to be thinking of the context of your school and your students. Students in every different community in America need some of the same things and some different things. Mm-hmm. Education is a very contextual job, and what's happening in the communities that you work in truly impacts the kind of work you need to do in the classroom. And it's never exactly the same for any two communities.
Very, very true. Very true. And you're talking about making time or the upfront time that you spend with those challenging students. You know who they are right away at the beginning of the year. Right. I think that's great advice. The more time you spend, the sooner you build those relationships with those students, the sooner you can have a great year. Do you have a favorite quote that has inspired you as a teacher, Maureen?
I don't really have one quote. Whenever I have a problem, though, I look for quotes, or whenever
Hmm.
I start a unit, I often look for quotes to lead the unit. But I did choose a quote tonight that sort of exemplifies what I believe in with regard to teaching. And it's a quote by a woman that I have looked to through her literature and writing as in her work as a mentor, and that's Marion Wright Edelman. And I love the quote from Marion that says, "If we don't stand up for children, then we don't stand for much." And early in my career, when I did struggle with classroom management, and I struggled with, trying to organize all the pieces of the puzzle of teaching, I used Marion Wright Edelman's book, Guide My Feet, Prayers and Meditation for Children, to be a great source of inspiration in my teaching. In fact, I would take that book out many a day in the afternoon and read through her meditations and think about them. And it was a true source of strength for me. And as the head of the Children's Defense Fund for the United States, Edelman did really put significant time and energy into her work and into doing the right thing by children in the United States.
Great, great. Well, I will make sure I also include a link to her and to her books on the show notes because, again, any help new teachers can get, even some of us veteran teachers, is appreciated. Is appreciated. So, if you could sit down with a new teacher just starting down their career, and you had time for just one piece of advice, what would that piece of advice be?
My advice would be to put children first. Um, I I really was in love with the creativity of learning first. And I think that's probably why at the beginning of my career, I had a few more issues with behavior management and classroom organization. So my advice would be put children first and let the curriculum come second. And that's really how I teach today. And it's very successful.
Yeah, I totally agree. With the new teacher, they're trying to impress administration. They're trying to demonstrate that they deserve to have been hired. So it's kind of hard to put aside that desire to follow the rules and the curriculum. But great point, great point.
Right. Also, as a new teacher, you're teaching to yourself as a child in many ways, and you have to be open to the fact that those children in your classroom represent many different styles of learning. So if you really take the time to get to know the children, then you're teaching the children first, and you're not just teaching yourself as a child.
Right. Very, very true. Very true. We all learn one way, and not every student learns the way we learned. Very good. Very good. So, Maureen, what is happening right now in your life that you're excited about?
Well, I'm really excited about learning design. I love technology. I love what technology has brought to the classroom. I always wished I had more hands as a teacher, and with technology, I have more hands. I just think it's very exciting. And so I like embedding technology into wonderful learning design, and I like embedding other tools and processes into that design too, and thinking about what learning experiences will really turn kids on and help them to learn as much as possible, in ways that will help them later in life. And so, as part of that, I'm actually working with a startup in California. We've been working online, and the name of the startup is UClass. And UClass has a great platform for creating lessons. And so I've been using their platform to create lessons for my own class, which I have to do anyways, including all the new Common Core standards, but I also publish those lessons on UClass. And I also like working with these young, enthusiastic entrepreneurs and educators that founded UClass about a year ago. Their energy inspires me, and the work with the startup is educating me in new ways. In fact, I'm headed out to California in February for a think tank weekend with UClass. So I am loving the learning design both in school and working with UClass and some other startups. I think it's very exciting.
Wow. Is UClass already online? Is it ready to go?
Yes, uclass.org. Anybody can take a look. They're really gaining momentum. And another aspect I really like about UClass is they're really reaching out to a global audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I really love the idea of a global audience. I love moving beyond just the United States when we're thinking about how to educate. And that's why I'm very active on Twitter. And that's one reason why I love Twitter too, is it connects me with educators all over the world, which really invigorates my ideas in teaching.
Yeah, well, I found you on Twitter, and I was very impressed with what you're doing in the classroom and now with the UClass. I'm going to add a link on to UClass on the podcast show notes as well. That's pretty cool stuff. That's pretty cool stuff.
And also, UClass invites teachers. UClass invites teachers to add their lessons, and they can make a little money. I make a little bit of money, not very much, but other teachers can add their lessons to UClass too. So because of my style, I like their platform. It makes my lesson design much easier for me.
I like your quote, "With technology, I have more hands." What a great image there.
Maybe I'll have to draw that. I like to sketch. I may draw that.
Yeah, that's a great quote there. So is there anything you want to share with the audience, Maureen, before we say goodbye?
I would just say, trust in yourself, follow your dreams, connect with people that can encourage you and support you, whether it's online or at school, and just be really nice to those children. I want education to be so good that the next generation doesn't even question supporting a really strong education for every child in the world. That it's an experience every person looks back on and says, every child needs this. We're going to support it. We know it's important.
Awesome. So if people want to say thank you for sharing all your insights here, Maureen, where can they find you?
The best place to find me is Twitter at @LookForSun. That's my Twitter handle. And that's the quickest, best way to find me.
Awesome. I will also link that onto the show notes so that people can say thank you. It's been a pleasure getting to meet you, Maureen. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and being on the podcast with me.
Thank you so much, Sam. It was nice meeting you too, and I really enjoyed your questions. It was fun.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So to the listeners, I know you have received a lot of great information in this episode. Now it's up to you to take it back to your classroom and implement what you learned today. So until next time,
be amazing.
The Amazing Teacher Podcast is brought to you by SuccessInTheClassroom.com. Learn more about being an amazing teacher by visiting SuccessInTheClassroom.com or TheAmazingTeacher.com.